Greetings, 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 brothers and sisters all over the world. Welcome to another episode of Positive Lifestyle Management Awareness Session. And my name is Fee Taylor. That's our brother, Santario Midnight Saints. And today we have a very important topic that we want to discuss, which is we're going to fully break down the order that was given in Mr. Larry Hoover's case. We've done a lot of studying, we have looked words up, we've done a lot of things that's concerning his case. And so we're going to take this opportunity today to try to break it down as best we can. We're not lawyers, we're not licensed lawyers, but I have studied law and I've done a lot of law work over the years. So I don't claim to be no lawyer, nothing like that. I've helped a lot of people, but the one person I couldn't help inside the system is myself. So at this time, I would like for our brother Santario, Mr. Midnight, to give an opening, and we're gonna get into our topics.
How y'all doing, everyone? It's a privilege and an honor to be in this position, man, just to be able to expound upon this motion of Mr. Larry Hoover. It is a opportunity, and no, just as Fee Taylor said himself, I am not a lawyer, but I have had the privilege and honor to be able to work with people in their cases. And, you know, tonight we're really just gonna take a moment and really dig into this motion and really discuss this order and really come to grips with what's being said within this order.
Okay, so but before we begin, I would like for everybody to hit those like buttons, hit the subscribe buttons, send in your comments because we'd like to hear your comments. Hit that notification bell so that you can always get a notification when Positive Lifestyle Management places a video. But before we begin, we would like to give a big acknowledgement and a big shout out to Mr. Justice A. Moore, the lawyer for Mr. Larry Hoover, for taking the fight head on, not being afraid of the government. We need more lawyers who will stand up and really fight for their clients. And to Mr. Justice Moore, he's our winner of the day, you know, Mr. Justice Moore. So thank you, brother, for being a winner. Thank you for being a true fighter and for justice. Thank you. And if there's anything that we can do here at Positive Lifestyle Management to bring more attention to what's occurring in your work, we would do it. So now, let's go and delve into let's delve into the order by the federal judge in Mr. Larry Hoover's case. So what we're going to do, I'm gonna share the screen with you. So for a second, you all not going to see us, and then we're going to pop back up on the side. So we're going to get this order up, and we're going to get right into the business. So as you all can see, this is the order in Mr. Larry Hoover's case. It's the United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois, Eastern Division, the United States of America, plaintiff versus Larry Hoover, AKA the chairman, the king, defendant, by Judge Harry D. Loewen Weber, and the order, Lynn Weber, okay. The order, defendant Larry Hoover's motion for relief under the First Step Act is denied without prejudice to refile. So I think we broke this down to everyone a while back, like last week when this order first came out, that without prejudice means that he's able to refile his motion to be resentenced. Now, the First Step Act is the provision that they was going under, and Mr. Larry Hoover was going under, was the dealing with the Fair Sentencing Act of 2010 that was placed in law up under Barack Obama's administration. So what the First Step Act did that was signed into law December the 20, I think it was December the 21st, 2018 by Donald Trump was made the First Step Act retroactive for all those who wasn't able to receive relief, which applied to Mr. Larry Hoover and the rest of his co-defendants. So, and not only Mr. Larry Hoover, but to a lot of other people as well. So let's really get into this order. And the first thing that we're going to delve into is that we can see in May of 1997, Larry Hoover was convicted by a jury of all 40 counts against him in the operative superseding indictment. The superseding indictment charged Hoover with being the leader of a continuous criminal enterprise known as the Gangster Disciples from approximately 1970 to 1995, United States versus Hoover. So they were saying that they went all the way back to 1970, all the way up until 1995. So we're talking over 25 years they were supposed to be investigating the Gangster Disciples. They say under Hoover's direction, the gang sold great quantities of cocaine, heroin, and other drugs in Chicago. So they knew that allegedly that this stuff was going on, and they allowed it to go on for 25 years. Although convicted on 40 counts, only the following sentences remain at the time of this order. 1, a mandatory life sentence on the continuous criminal enterprise under 21 U.S.C. 848, which is he was sentenced up under 848B, which is a mandatory life sentence. And 2, a non-mandatory concurrent life sentence on use of a minor in drug operation under 21 U.S.C. 861A1. 3, a non-mandatory concurrent life sentence for possession with intent to distribute or distribution of a controlled substance under 21 U.S.C. 841A1. And 4, a mandatory 5-year additional sentence under U.S.C. 924C. I don't know how he got the 5-year sentence for 924C. He was charged with a 924C, which is a gun, was dealing with a gun. I don't know how he got there when he was incarcerated. That charge there, it don't really make no sense to me. But they gave it to him. So on December the 21st, 2019, Hoover filed this motion for relief. Hoover moved the court to use its discretion to impose a reduced sentence as set forth in the Fair Sentencing Act as retroactively applied under the First Step Act. In his motion, yes, when I
was looking at that word discretion for those who don't know what that word discretion means. Discretion is a liberty and a privilege allowed to a judge within the confines of right and justice, but independent of narrow and unbinding rules of positive law to decide and act in accordance with what is fair, equitable, and wholesome as determined upon the peculiar circumstances of the case, and as discerned by his personal wisdom, experience, guided by the spirit, principles, and analogies of the law. For those who don't know what discretion means.
Okay, so break that down in a nutshell. Basically what they're saying is that the judge had discretion and on his sole power, if he wanted to, limited power, if he wanted to grant the motion or not. However, even with having discretion to rule, a judge can also abuse his discretion when it goes totally against the law. So the judge can abuse his discretion, especially if the same law is applying to others in similar situations. All right. So in his motion, Hoover focused on his eligibility under the First Step Act and asked for a further hearing regarding the applicable sentencing guideline. The motion otherwise only noted that Hoover had been incarcerated on these charges for 25 years and was approaching 70 years of age. So now this is a man in 2019 that was going to be 70 years old. So in 2020, in December, he turned 70 years of age.
Exactly.
This in November the 30th. So this November the 30th, he will be 71 years of age. So now we're talking about a man who's almost 71 years of age still in prison. All right. the government responded arguing that the court lacked discretion to resentence Hoover. So they challenged it and saying that the government was challenging, saying, okay, hey, no, the judge don't have no discretion to resentence Mr. Hoover. The government also argued that Hoover's crime encompassing over 2 decades of crime and corruption while Hoover was serving a life sentence in state prison was uniquely in need of continuous federal incarceration. Further, the government argued that Hoover's disciplinary history with the Federal Bureau of Prisons indicated a lack of rehabilitation. So they was basically saying now that, okay, they really ain't had no legs to stand on.
No, they didn't.
They didn't have no legs to stand on because, as we would see as the order went on, the judge broke it down and showed that he did have discretion. So they was trying to use at that moment, they was trying to say, okay, that he had called disciplinary reports, or as we call them in the Fed, shots, and that he shouldn't be resentenced. But let's get this understood. The courts wasn't focused on guys who was receiving disciplinary reports at that time. They was focusing, and they still are focusing on those who are eligible to receive a sentence reduction, because guys was being released from federal prison who had caught 30, 40, 50 shots, who had been charged with other crimes. They was releasing these guys from prison. So this argument that they was using, that the government was saying about his disciplinary history, was basically a flimsy argument. So Mr. Hoover came back and stated that he had only been subject to 8 infractions while in federal custody. So you're talking about, at this time, over a 25-year period, he had only received 8 infractions.
Exactly.
Hoover noted that most of his infractions happened over 20 years ago. So you talking about over 20 years prior, that's when he caught the majority of the infractions.
Exactly.
When Hoover was still adjusting to life at an 88 Supermax security prison. So Mr. Hoover further went on to state that Hoover then described the conditions of his current confinement, which includes spending 20 to 24 hours per day locked alone in his cell, a room approximately 7 by 12 feet with a concrete bed, desk, stool, and combination sink and toilet, which is a sink and a toilet together. Hoover noted that he was unable to see anything from his single window other than a building and the sky. To show rehabilitation, Hoover pointed to the fact that he had become a voracious reader and had completed, later amended to thousands hours of education courses. So now you're talking about over a 25-year period by being in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. We're not even talking about all the hours that he has spent in the state prison systems going through rehabilitation and taking education courses. This man that took over 1,000 rehabilitation courses in 88 Florence. Because Hoover has been housed in severe isolation in 88 Supermax, he argued he was unable to demonstrate further rehabilitation beyond educational study. So by him being housed in 88, only thing he could do is education. He can't do no more. He can't do nothing else. He can't even participate in no other rehabilitative studies that most prisoners participate in while they are in prison. So it said, as part of his response, the government also moved for oral office before this court. On July 15, 2020, the court granted a motion and limited the argument to the question of whether the court should use its discretion to resentence Hoover. At the end of the proceeding, the court requested additional briefing from both parties on whether the Illinois Department of Correction was secure enough to prevent Mr. Hoover from returning to gang activity should he be isolated into a state of Illinois custody.
Release.
Now watch this here. This is where it gets very, very interesting. Mr. Hoover's lawyer is shooting down everything that the government is raising. In response, Hoover submitted a brief informing the court that since Hoover's conviction, the Illinois Department of Correction has developed a central intelligence unit to identify, track, and investigate gang members. So Illinois had become more, bro, they came into the point where they got them a central intelligence unit where they can identify and track whoever's involved in any type of gang activity. Because basically what they've done in the Illinois Department of Correction is dismantle street organizations altogether.
Exactly.
Hoover also argued that as a 70-year-old man, he would no longer be in a position to influence persons 40 or 50 years younger than him. Instead, Hoover argued that there is no reasonable basis to suppose Mr. Hoover retain some kind of residual hierarchy authority over anyone.
Hoover additionally argued that gangs are no longer centralized as they were when Hoover was charged of his criminal enterprise. Instead, gangs are now comprised of smaller neighborhood cliques. It says the government also filed a supplement response. In it, the government warned the court that it could not rely on the Illinois life sentence, as Hoover would be eligible to go before the Illinois Prisoner Review Board and could point the court's current resentencing as a reason to grant Hoover relief. It says further, the government advised that the IDOC provided a letter describing Hoover would present unique challenges for which enhanced security measures and increased resources cannot guarantee personal safety. In other words, they were saying by his very presence, that would be a security factor for the IDOC. It says, IDOC's letter declares its intention either to partner with the BOP or a sister state to house Hoover if he entered state custody, and noted that it had a preliminary agreement with the BOP to continue Hoover's state sentence with them if necessary. In other words, they were reaching out to the BOP just in case he was resentenced under the First Step Act and the Fair Sentencing Act, that the BOP would still be a place for him to be housed.
Okay.
Even after serving all that time within the BOP. It says the government also
I'm listening.
It says the government also provided the court with an Illinois Parole Board interview from 2014, where Hoover explained his prior criminal activity as follows. During the course of his During the course of his interview, inmate Hoover stated that he ordered the murder of Mr. William Young, but he did not shoot and kill Mr. Young on the evening of February 26, 1973. When asked why he ordered the murder of Mr. Young, inmate Hoover refused to answer the question. As to the murder of Joshua Shaw, inmate Hoover denies the shooting or the ordering thereof Mr. Joshua Shaw. Inmate Hoover stated that Mr. Shaw was at risk in life after being involved in
not after being involved, in life being involved.
In narcotic sales.
Okay.
As to his involvement in the Gangster Disciple Street Gang, inmate Hoover stated that he was one of the principal organizers of the sect in the Creation Sect Street Gang. When questioned as to his current participation and involvement, inmate Hoover denied any involvement or level of participation.
Stop. Let's get this understood. Mr. Larry Hoover stated in 2014 to the Illinois Parole Board, and he has stated in his motion that he is not involved, period, on any level of participation in any gangster disciples or whatever you want to call it, black gangster disciples, whatever you want to call it. He is not involved, period. So let's get this understood, y'all. He's not giving out no orders. He's not talking to anybody. He's not telling anybody to do anything. He's strictly doing his time and trying to come home to his family. Okay.
That's it. And it says, he further stated that the organization that he had created had been dismantled and is no longer the same organization.
Stop. Stop again. Let's get this understood. Illinois Department of Corrections instituted the Central Intelligence Unit, which was to track, identify, and basically dismantle street organizations in the Illinois Department of Corrections. The federal government dismantled the street organization, the gangster disciples, whatever you want to call them. And when they came down with the indictment and gave out all that time, it dismantled, because as we can see today, the streets of America are in influx from all sorts of street organizations, not just from one side, but from all sides, because they are no longer the way that they once were because of the government and the state. The governments, both federal and local and state, has dismantled. So now you basically have these little small cliques who all the people to come together. And they got these neighborhood cliques. That's it.
That's it.
They might be claiming to be something, but this is not the case because there's no hierarchy there. So now, I want everybody to understand, and we've said this here, and we're going to continue to say it. This has absolutely nothing to do with any gang activity with trying to free Mr. Larry Hoover. This has everything to do with a human rights violation and a violation of a person's constitutional rights, dealing with a cruel and unusual punishment up under the 8th Amendment. Violation of a person's 5th Amendment rights. This is a human rights issue. So everybody should pay attention to what's actually occurring here. It has nothing to do with no game. It has nothing, absolutely, period, to do with games. This is all about a human rights violation. Okay. You want to keep going?
It says, inmate Hoover finally stated that he was convicted in the media for crimes he never committed because the media painted a distorted picture of him.
Okay.
In other words, what he was saying is basically the picture that they was painting wasn't even real. It wasn't even factual. It was distorted. It didn't have nothing. It didn't have no real evidence to prove what they were saying about him. They just blew it out of proportion.
Okay, so basically also what they're doing is accusing and blaming him for the actions of others. Now, I think I mentioned this before, and I'm gonna mention it again. What's the police name that killed George Floyd up in Minneapolis? Derek Chavez or Chevron, whatever his name?
Derek Chauvin.
Derek Chauvin.
Derek Chauvin.
What did the police, the chief of police, say in Minneapolis? The first thing that man said is this: they wanted the citizens of Minneapolis and the world to know that this was the act of a rogue cop, and for the citizens not to blame the whole police department of the police force for the actions of the few. They will always tell you this here. When the situation happened up in DC in January the 6th, 2021, what had the politicians said? Do not blame Donald Trump for the actions of the citizens. And so what they're doing now, they're not blaming. They're not accusing. They're not holding them responsible. So why is it that you holding Mr. Larry Hoover responsible for people's actions that he don't know, don't have no involvement, don't have no participation, period. Period.
Because it's a human rights issue.
That's right.
It's a human rights issue. It's nothing more, nothing less. This is a human rights issue. How you gonna blame somebody when they have no voice on the outside besides the voice of their lawyer, their wife, and their children, and those advocating in a righteous way on his behalf?
Now,
okay, page 6.
Let's move to
It says
Hoover. Oh, let's go up and say in response.
Okay, it says, in response, Hoover filed a rebuttal alleging a parade of false narratives as to Hoover's actions and impact. Hoover noted that he had gotten reprimanded by the Federal Bureau of Prisons for talking about reissuing the blueprint, and then denied that the blueprint was subversive.
Okay, so let's look that word up. Let's find out what this word subversive means, man, because that's a very strong word. It's a very, 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 very strong word. And what the word means is, let me pull this up, man, so that everybody can see this word, man. I want everybody to be able to see this word. What subversive mean? It says subversive means seeking or intending to subvert and establish systems or institutions, disruptive, troublemaking, inflammatory, insurgent, and insurrectional more. So
exactly,
basically what he's saying, and it's the truth, that the blueprint is not a disruptive, troublemaking, inflammatory, insurgent, insurrectional book. It is a book that is based on positive, productive thoughts. So they reprimanded him for even saying the word blueprint, which the blueprint is a legal book that has an ISBN number. This is the blueprint right here. This book has an ISBN number. It's in the Library of Congress, because every book that is written goes into the Library of Congress. So all the thing this man was saying was, let's reissue the book.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's all he was saying, because, you know, at the end of the day, you know, he even stated in the book where even in reading the book, it would allow society to judge us. You know what I mean? So that depiction of what they painted in this order is falsified.
Okay.
It says, the blueprint is a book describing Larry Hoover and the origin of the Gangster Disciples, which downplays the streets, gangs, violent acts, and drug distribution network. Jerry Thomas and Andrew Martin, gang writing new chapters and trying to gain legitimacy. The Chicago Tribune, September 19th, 1996.
Okay, hold on.
Instead of
hold on now. You got to break this down. What was going on in September of 1996? Remember, they got indicted August 31st, 1995. So during this time, the smear campaign was on. So in September of 1996, the smear campaign was so heavy because this was a high profile case. So they were smearing him. They were smearing everything that was concerning not only Mr. Hoover, but everybody that was involved at that time that they got arrested. So we got to be able to look. This is where this parade of false narratives that Mr. Hoover is showing.
Exactly.
No, okay.
Like it said on page 5, it said it was a distorted view of the media.
That's right. And see, the Chicago Sun-Times is part of the media.
Exactly.
All right.
It says, instead, the blueprint recast Hoover and the Gangster Disciples' actions as beneficial to the community, as part of a continuing effort to portray themselves in a positive light. Hoover also argued that the IDOC had been fully capable of housing other notorious inmates safely and thus minimized the IDOC's letter of concerns, and further argued that Hoover's eventual request for parole should be of no concern to this court.
Stop. So he's saying this here. Okay, you had other people that was in the IDOC who wind up gaining their freedom. You had people who had killed police who have been released. You had the axe murder who have been released. You had rapists who has been released. You've had notorious killers and 6 sadistic-minded peoples who have been released. They was released from the Illinois Department of Corrections. And like Mr. Hoover said, whatever's going on in the state court has absolutely no bearings on his case in the federal court.
Exactly.
So why are you bringing up what happened with his case in the state court when it ain't got no bearings on this case in itself? He had already been sentenced for that case. He got arrested for that case in 1973.
Exactly.
So why is he still being held? Why is the federal court worried about something that happened in 1973? So we got to look at everything that's occurring now. You know what I'm saying? Look at this whole campaign. So let's go to page 8. And on page 8, matter of fact, let's start on page 7. Now, this is what the government is doing now. Pay attention to what the government is going to do here. They go down at the bottom and say, in addition to the voluminous briefings, the government filed one additional supplement in February of 2021. In it, the government provided information from a 2014 indictment that the Gangster Disciples continue to celebrate Larry Hoover's birthday yearly. All right. You got people whose birthdays to celebrate. Hell, they celebrate George Washington's birthday. He was a murderer and a slave owner and everything. You celebrate Thomas Jefferson's birthday. He was a slave owner. You celebrate pagan holidays around here, Easter and Valentine's Day. You celebrate all these birthdays. So if we celebrate slave owners' birthdays as being great men, you mean to tell me that somebody cannot celebrate another person's birthday? They celebrate a person's birthday who is no longer alive. Plenty of people get birthdays to celebrate. I celebrate my mother's birthday. I celebrate a lot of people's birthday that's no longer here. We celebrate birthdays every day in the United States of America. So you mean to tell me just because somebody is celebrating somebody else's birthday, that's a crime? And that members of the Gangster Disciples were at a minimum. Now, let's get this at the lowest level, a minimum purporting to be appointed by Larry Hoover and attempted to communicate with him in 88 Supermax. Okay, let's look at the word purported. purporting. Let's look at what it's saying now. It says, appear or claim to be or do something, especially falsely professed. So that means somebody is pretending. They even saying it, the government is saying it. People are pretending to be leaders, being appointed by him. Knowing that the government now, I want y'all to understand, the government has basically said that they know that this man ain't appointed nobody. This man is still on level 1 in ADX. He hasn't communicated with nobody. He ain't got no involved. He don't have no levels of participation. And then you have those who are lying, false prophets, false leaders,
false teachers,
that the government know that they're not communicating with Larry Hoover. And the government know that he ain't made them no leaders. The government is using the words. We got to be able to understand what these words mean in this language. But they using this false narrative to tear him down. These are the things, men and women, that we have to pay attention to. We have to pay attention to. So now, let's go over to page 13. Let's go over to page 13. We're going to start here. They talk about these offenses. They say these offenses are grave and deadly serious. As the overseer of a continuous criminal enterprise, Hoover attempted to create law unto himself and construct an organization in direct opposition to the American social contract. My brother, you have done a lot of research on this, on this American social contract. Can you break it down and tell us what the American social contract is?
All right. As I look at the term social contract, the term social contract refers to the idea that the state exists only to serve the will of the people who are the source of all political power enjoyed by the state. The people can choose to give or withhold this power. This idea of social contract is one of the foundations of the American political system.
Okay, now watch this here. Now let's get a little bit more. We're gonna break this down a little bit more on basically what you just said. And say the social contract argues, typically, posted, that individuals have consented either explicitly or tactfully to surrender some of their freedoms and submit to the authority of the ruler or to the decision of a majority in exchange for protection of their remaining rights or maintenance of the social order. So you mean to tell me that this man has violated the social contract of America? So what is the United States military doing? What is the United States government doing? Are they in opposition to the American social contract? Was George Washington in opposition of the American social contract?
Exactly.
So these are just questions that we have to pay attention to. Because y'all saying that this man is so bad. He's the worst criminal in all of America, in the history of America. Forget about all the rest of the criminals that has killed thousands and thousands of people. Forget about J. Edgar Hoover. Did he violate the American social contract by investigating and bugging people and causing and creating COINTELPRO to destroy and to dismantle all type of Black organizations and to stop the rise of a Black Messiah? did he destroy the American social contract? Was he in opposition?
Yes, he did. Yes, he was.
Okay.
Because if you look up what the COINTELPRO was really all about, it was to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, in other words, neutralize the activity of Black movements,
Hold on.
period.
That's not in opposition to the American social contract? Okay. We'll wait.
But, go ahead.
Now, I was just telling the peoples that we'll wait for your answers in the comments. It says further, Hoover is renowned and celebrated to this day by the gangster disciples. Nathan B. Forrest is celebrated by the Ku Klux Klan. They got statues of Nathan B. Forrest all over America. They got a mural down here and right there on the riverfront in Paducah, Kentucky, with Lloyd Tillman and Nathan Bedford Forrest. Isn't Nathan B. Forrest the same person that went up in Fort Pillow and killed over 300 Asiatic soldiers in Fort Pillow, Tennessee?
Yes, he did.
So, and he celebrated. The Ku Klux Klan celebrated him. They celebrate him.
Exactly.
Okay. To the extent that any one person can deter another to commit crime. Okay. Now this is where we get to the good part. They say to the extent that any one person can deter another to commit crime. So they saying now that Larry Hoover is the one person that can deter another person from committing crime. So they're going to hold Larry Hoover's life imprisonment symbolically to demonstrate that the rule of law reaches even those in power who seem untouchable. So his imprisonment now, his life sentencing is strictly to use him as a symbol. He's a symbol now. So let's see what a symbol is. A symbol is a mark, a sign, or word that indicates, signifies, or is understood as representing an idea, object, or relationship. Symbols allows people to go beyond what is known or seen by creating linkage between otherwise very different concepts and experiences. All communications and data processing is achieved through the use of symbols. Symbols take the form of words, sounds, gestures, ideas, or visual images, and are used to convey other ideas and beliefs. So let's look at this here. On the 4th of July weekend in Chicago, 92 people were shot, with over 14 of them being killed. Just last weekend, 40-some people were shot. I just watched a video on the expressway in Chicago, on the expressway between 95th and 87th, where some guys had jumped out of a car, in a car now, and on the expressway, and get to shooting. So I guess, did they think about all these shootings and killings that's been going on? These 700, 800 murders that's been going on in the city of Chicago over the last decade or so. Is that a symbolism? Is that stopping them, you holding Mr. Larry Hoover in prison? Is that deterring them from committing crime? Is that deterring people from selling drugs? Is that deterring people from raping people? So the answer to that is
catching little girls off the street.
yes. The answer to that is no. Now watch this here. It says, Hoover argues that he is old and these crimes are old, and that the government's allegation of his continued renown are baseless. Hoover's briefing further argues that even if claims of his continuous influence are true, Hoover disclaimed responsibility for the people who celebrate his birthday in memory of him, or for current gang members who trade on his name or attempt to contact him. Instead, Hoover wishes to spend the remainder of his days quietly with his wife, children, and grandchildren. While Hoover might disclaim responsibility for the gangster disciples' action in his legal document, Hoover does not argue that he has publicly recanted his prior actions as leader of the gangster disciples or otherwise renounced his membership. Now, let me show you how they double talking now. This is how they double talking. This is how they double talking now. We're gonna go back to page 5. What did Mr. Hoover say right here? When questioned as to his current and participation in involvement, inmate Hoover denied any involvement or level of participation. Hold on now. Let's need to go back a little bit further. Let's get this right. Let's go to page 4. Mr. Hoover said this here. Hoover also argued that as a 70-year-old man, he would no longer be in a position to influence persons 40 or 50 years younger than him. Instead, Hoover argues that there is no reasonable basis to suppose Mr. Hoover retains some kind of residual hierarchy authority over anyone. Hoover additionally argues that gangs are no longer as centralized as they were when Hoover was in charge. Was in charge, meaning past tense. So for the judge to sit here, and for the judge to sit here and say that he hasn't renounced his membership, that's double talking when it's already been stated. It's already been stated and it's already in the record. How can he publicly reach out to say something when he can't even talk to nobody?
Exactly.
How? Who he gonna say it to? Tell me who he gonna say it to. Who he gonna renounce his membership to? They gonna let him do an interview? Man, playing, man. They playing. Let's go to page 14. The man says, the addition he's perpetuated and the resulting deaths of others, wives, children, grandchildren throughout the state of Illinois, like he has called all these murders on other people's wives, children, and grandchildren. This man is not even about that, man. And they know he's not about that. But we know the true reason why they do not want to release this man from prison. Because he threatens the political, he threatens the educational, economical, political, and social development of those who are benefiting from the death and destruction of the poor. And I'm not talking about no color. I'm talking about poor peoples in general, because Mr. Hoover does not care about a person's color. He is not, he's not concerned about that. No, so now let's go down here. It said, as part of the decision to resentence, the court also considered the need to protect the public from further crimes. At this time, Hoover still has a life sentence pending in the Illinois state court system based on convictions for ordering 2 murders in the early 1970s. The court thus considered whether transference back to the DOC will protect the public from future crimes. Unlike almost all other inmates, the court cannot assume that Hoover would be equally prevented from attempting further crimes in state prison which underscores the unusual nature of Hoover's position. So y'all mean to tell me that this is a 70-year-old man A 70-year-old man, and look how they talking. They're not using no law. If you notice in this whole order, there is no case law supporting this position.
Exactly.
So you telling me that this 70-year-old man cannot be watched with the Central Intelligence Unit of Illinois, and the Central Intelligence Unit has already dismantled all street organizations in the Illinois Department of Corrections? This is what you're telling me?
That's foolishness. That's foolishness.
Totally garbage.
That's foolishness, because when you go to the prison and they know, they check your body, they look for tattoos, they do everything. So they know, you know what I'm saying? Like this, I just got out of state, 2019. They will know if you are part of or doing anything that is not according to the law within the prison system. So that's crap. They will STG you as soon as you get to the prison system.
Now watch this here, bro. They say as the cities of his previous crime. The word cities means, let's get into cities. Cities mean the place where a particular event occurred. It is a legal law term. Latin for location, be it where the crime or accident took place or where the building stands. All right. So they saying in the cities with the place of his previous crimes. Hoover's relocation to state prison would be riskier than the average transfer of an inmate. Indeed, the federal conviction for which he is currently serving a life sentence is based in part on his continued operation of the gangster disciples while incarcerated in the IDOC facility. Since Hoover federal conviction, the Illinois State Prison System has developed a central intelligence unit which specifically combat gang crime within the state prison system. So look how they double talk. Look how they double talk. You said that he can't go back. But you mean to tell me your central intelligence unit that's designed to combat gang crime cannot deal with a 70-year-old man? You cannot deal with a 70-year-old man. So what do you have it for then? What is the purpose of it? They say further, to the extent that the IDOC has reservations about its ability to protect the public from Hoover, it has made arrangement for Hoover to stay in the federal prison system, even as Hoover enters Illinois state custody.
Exactly.
So y'all gonna keep him in the feds, even if y'all release him, because he still be a state custody. So y'all still want to keep him in the feds. Okay. But he still be up under Illinois state law, even in the feds. Now it says, while Hoover argues he is too old to have contact or any connection with the criminal world and will be unable to partake in the criminal activity, the court noted that Hoover's unusual position also extends to his relative likelihood to commit further crimes. Come on, man. The man is constantly telling y'all, he's constantly telling you that he's renounced and that he's not a part of any criminal activity or anything. This is the hypocrisy that's going on in this system. This is the injustice that we have to pay attention to, people. This is why it's important for all of us to get involved. This is the reason. Now we go to page 17. Look what they say about it now. They say the court agrees. The court agrees.
It says the court agrees that Hoover's punishment is particularly grim and lacking in rehabilitative opportunities.
Hold on.
Let's look at that word grim for a minute.
There you go. It's right up there on the screen. It says, we're going to go down here. It says depressing or worrying to consider, dreadful, dire, ghastly, horrible, horrendous, horrid, terrible, awful, appalling, frightening, shocking, unspeakable, atrocious, harrowing, grisly, gruesome, unrelentlessly harsh, merciless or severe, merciless, cruel, ruthless, pitiless, savage, vicious, brutal, harsh, severe. This is what the judge is saying that this man is going through. And the judge says what? It is difficult for Hoover to receive rehabilitative treatment when subject to such extreme isolation.
So they know. The court knows.
So people.
The court knows it's cruel and unusual punishment for what they're doing to him. They know that.
So people, will we please speak out? Hashtag free Larry Hoover now to your United States representatives, to your United States senators, to the federal judge in this case. Hashtag speak out. Well, the judge is telling us right in our face what this man is going through. And this man is still suffering for the last almost 48 years in strong silence. How can we leave him? How can we leave any man,
any human,
to go through that? I don't care what color, what race, or any of that.
This is not about race, it's about humanity. This is a human life. I tell you what, brothers and sisters, look at this. It's a post, it's an article about the United States treatment of human rights in the year 2020. That article alone will show you the in-depthness of how human rights are being violated all day, every day.
And what article is this here, bro? What can they find this at? We always want to be able to direct them on where they need to go at. We always want to give them the information. Where they find it at?
The article is on, it's called the United States, the United States Human Rights 2020. It's on a human rights page. You can look it up. You can Google it right now. It's called the United States Human Rights 2020.
Okay. Now, let's look at this here. On page 18, it says, although the court considered all the above factors, the court declines to extend its discretion to resentence defendant Hoover because Hoover crimes have always been one of persuading others to follow out his command. The court is concerned that there is an active risk of harm if his resentences causes his release from prison. Additionally, Hoover has not yet used the Bureau of Prison process to request the opportunity to prove rehabilitation through lower security confinement. Hoover points out that the court has exercised its discretion to some of his co-defendants. See orders as to Johnny Jackson, document number 1225, order to Jerry Strawman, document number 1293, order as to Terenzi Wilson, docket number 1295. However, now let's remind you now, I want to get y'all to understand now, all during these brothers' trial, they had these very peoples, Mr. Johnny Jackson, Mr. Jerry Strawman, Mr. Terenzi Wilson, they had all these peoples falsely labeled as being leaders and organizers. They was using these men to say they was organizers and leaders and this and that. They was causing this, they was selling all these many drugs. This is the narrative that they painted about these guys. So that's why all these guys were sentenced as life sentence up under 848B. because they was organized and they was the actual leaders in the continual criminal enterprise. That was the whole narrative through all of this here. Now, watch this here. However, Hoover's situation is unique in that he was the unquestionable leader of the criminal enterprise, while his co-defendants were quite obviously followers. So they just had made these guys followers now, but the whole time now they was telling this lie about these guys being these big organizers, and they was leaders, and they was this, and they was that, and they was the reason why all these drugs was being sold. They was the reason why all these things was occurring in the United States of America. But now when it comes to Mr. Hoover, these peoples are no longer leaders or organizers as they falsely claimed them to be in during the trial and all these years. Come on, man, y'all cannot be talking double standards, man. The same thing that applies to these brothers, the same thing that applies to Mr. Hoover. They wasn't organizers or leaders then. And they know that they wasn't organizers or leaders, and now they finally saying it. They are finally admitting that they wasn't. But now you holding it up like the sole leader of all of this here was Mr. Larry Hoover. As Mr. Larry Hoover is so persuasive, why hasn't he persuaded nobody in ADX? Why hasn't he done nothing in ADX homes if he's so persuasive? If y'all do not want him around nobody, now he's been around guards, he's been around other prisoners. Why did he persuade them to do anything? Just explain that to me. Make it make sense. Because it's all a bunch of crap. So we've broken this order down, and yet we're going to get into this last paragraph so that everybody can understand. It is yet untested whether or not the court has additional opportunities to exercise its discretion on Hoover's sentencing at a later time under the First Step Act. So this ain't never been tested before, but the judge is giving this man the opportunity to come back. As such, the court denies the motion without prejudice, meaning all this stuff that I just said about you, Mr. Hoover, is a bunch of crap. So I'm gonna give you the opportunity to come back. And also, I really don't want to commit political suicide, so I'm gonna kick the can down the street. And if the Seventh Circuit or anybody else want to take it up and release you, then they can. But I just don't want to kill myself in the process.
Exactly. He developed a Pontius Pilate syndrome real quick.
And so the court denies the motion without prejudice and defers any determination on the question of its capability to reconsider at a later date. So the court is giving up any deference on that. You know what I'm saying? Okay, listen, man. He's going to defer to any determination if he can do it or not. But if he's unable to do it, then we know that I strongly believe this here, baby. This is an abuse of discretion, man. Because everything that this man just said in this order, man, has absolutely nothing to do with the law. But it's all of this personal and symbolic, as they said. They using purported false leaders, false prophets, as I call them, to say that they were somebody, and all the time they know that this man ain't appointed nobody nowhere, but they still using this narrative. So all these people that sitting around and talking about they received some from whoever this was up in ADS, about they received a order from Mr. Hoover and he gave them their authority. The government is saying, letting the world know that it is a lie. The government is letting you know that it's a lie. But we're gonna use this lie anyway, even though we know it's a lie, we're gonna still use it to not grant him resentencing.
Exactly.
So, conclusion, for the reasons stated herein, Larry Hoover's motion for relief under the First Step Act is denied without prejudice. I know this took a long time, men and women, and we've probably been over an hour doing this here, but it was necessary so that we can go through this whole entire order so that people can really see what the order was about, that it was a bunch of nonsense. And at this time, we'd like to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to sit down and to go with us, to follow us through this journey. And just listen, y'all. We have a responsibility. We have a responsibility, a moral responsibility to speak up in an intelligent manner, in an intelligent way. He's no longer the chairman. He's no longer the king. He's no longer the chief. So we have to recognize that this is a 70-year-old man, soon to be 71-year-old man, who is no longer involved in anything of this nature. Let's get behind him. Let's help him. Let's use our voice to help get him out. And with that, we're going to end another episode of Positive Lifestyle Management. We would like to thank each and every one of you for coming out to support us. And I know that this was a long journey through this here, but it was a lot of information that we had to get out. And we broke this order down piece by piece. Thank you again. And hit those like buttons, hit the subscribe buttons, hit the comments, send your comments in to us, and hit that notification bell. So on behalf of the entire Positive Lifestyle Management staff, Project Righteous Endeavors, Reconstructed Minds Incorporated, I lead by saying, #free Larry Hoover now. Peace.